That one time that Crusaders brought down half the Christian world. If you wish to know the story, let me get my scroll unfurled. So way back when, in 1202, Pope Innocent was antsy. So he proclaimed a new crusade, cause that was Europe's fancy. Count Boniface had gravitas, Count Baldwin many knights, but neither had the means to reach the land of Israelites. To Venice then they thus appealed, they hoped the Doge was kind. Enrico was a zealous man, and 94, and blind. The counts then made a promise that they thought that they could keep. The Doge agreed, but cautioned them, the price would not be cheap. But once the transports were prepared, the counts were filled with dread. It turned out they could only pay a third of what they'd said. The Doge then made a deal with them. In Zara they would pillage, as then to pay their massive debt with booty from the village. They thus attacked, but in the end no loot had been located, and worse, they found the Pope decreed them excommunicated. The knights were broke, exhausted, and they couldn't go back home, but all their prayers were answered by a royal on the Rome. This man Alexios walked in, with motives quite arcane, and told the knights he'd pay their debts if they'd restore his reign. For years ago, his father Isaac ruled the Byzantines, and now he wished to start a coup with these wayward marines. For Isaac was deposed by one Alexios III, whose sum of military skill could scant eclipse a turd. They all agreed, and off they went to siege Constantinople, a city rich enough to line their streets with gold and opal. And somehow during all of this, the Pope gave them his blessing. Byzantium was orthodox, which he found most distressing. The siege was long, but in the end, the ruler fled up north. Those once crusaders made their new Alexios IV. But then the troubles soon began. His reign was not to be, for once he'd paid the knights' old debts, he'd drained the treasury. As taxes soared, the riots grew more fierce and bellicose, and from the ashes then arose a new Alexios. Think 2 Alexii were tough, it now gets more absurd. In just 6 months, the crown was worn by 5th and 4th and 3rd. Their puppet gone, the counts and doge abandoned thoughts of heirs. 'Cause if their armies won the war, why wasn't power theirs? They fought again to scale the walls and block the naval straits. It took 3 days, but in the end they'd seized the palace gates. They split the realm amongst themselves, stole everything they found, and by the end they'd nearly burned the city to the ground. The Doge got trade monopolies, Count Baldwin got the crown, but Boniface got only Greece, so felt a bit let down. Crusading against Christendom. It sounds almost poetic, but when you stop to think a bit, it's really quite pathetic. In 40 years it all collapsed and status quo returned. And so with that, I feel it's time my story be adjourned.